Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Gateway to IT. So as discussed in our last video, we are now going to install the domain controller that is going to provide the Active Directory, DNS and NTP server services required by our vSphere environment. Remember that as discussed in our planning introduction video, we need to have the domain controllers on the management network where our ESXi servers would be residing as per our lab plan. So let's start. Let me show you the plan as a recap. So this network 192.168.1.0 with 24-bit subnet mask is where we are going to have the Windows domain controller. So let's start now. So in order to have your domain controller installed, you need to select File, create virtual machine, go to Custom, click on Next, select the latest hardware compatibility, click on Next again. So make sure you have the option I will install operating system later selected and then click on next. Now we need to make sure that we have Microsoft Windows selected, and I'm planning to install Windows Server 2012 R2 uh, for the domain controller. So I'll select the operating system as Windows Server 2012 R2 and then click on next. Once we click on next, we need to provide the location where we are going to create this machine, this domain controller virtual machine. So let me give it a name. So I'm giving it 10-DC05, 5 being the IP address from the 192.168.1. IP address range. So I'm I've given it that name. The server belongs to Denver Network and is providing domain control services. So that's how I built the naming convention. So once we have decided on the name, we are going to click on next. And after clicking on next, let's make sure that we have BIOS selected. Then click on next. Click on next. We can leave the RAM as 2 GB. We can click on next. We will change the network. We will change this network selection once the virtual machine is created. So we'll click on next again. Let it be LSI Logic SAS. Click on next. Click on next again. Create a new virtual disk. We can make it 100 gigabytes, and I prefer to store in one single file, but you can select the second option as well. So let's click on next. Once we are on the, it's now going to create a virtual disk of 100 gigabytes. So click on next and then click on finish. So once our virtual machine is created, the for domain controller, we can go to edit settings, and from the LAN segment for the network card on the LAN segment, we can select the management network because this has to be on the management network, and then click on OK. Once we have made the selection, we also need to provide it the ISO for 2012 R2. So click on browse, go to your drive where you have the ISO stored. You can download the evaluation version of Windows Server 2012 R2 from Microsoft, and then select servers 2012 and then select the ISO. Once you select the ISO, click open and then click OK. Once you have made the selection, once you provided the ISO, click on power on this virtual machine, and now it starts the installation. So let's wait for a moment where it asks us to click on next, and then we will pause the video uh, so that you don't have to see the entire installation process. So let's click on next, click on install now, and now I'm pausing the video and will resume once we have the domain controller installed. Alright, so as you can see, we are done installing the operating system but you can see that the resolution of the machine is not good, and when I click inside the machine, my cursor gets stuck. So I need to install the VM tools. So we can go to the VM menu and click on install VMware tools. We have to wait for some time to see the tools get installed. So it's going to take some time to install the tools. Once the VM tools are installed, you will see that the resolution becomes good and the mouse does not get stuck inside the VM. So once I'm done with the process, I'll resume again. So you can see that the tools are VM tools are installed. Now, as soon as I click on finish, the machine is going to reboot, and we will resume the video after the machine reboots. We can now see that the resolution is good and the mouse does not get stuck anymore inside the VM. So I'm going to do some initial configuration. Let me check the time zone. I need to change the time zone to suit my current location. So I'm selecting the time zone as Chennai, Kolkata, Mumbai. Click on OK. And now we need to open the network connection and provide the IP address as per our plan. So I'm going to give it an IP address of 192 uh, 192.168.1.5. Subnet mask as 2.255.255.255.0, and the default gateway will be the IP address of our pfSense firewall. And because this is a domain controller and will be hosting the DNS services, it needs to point to itself for the DNS name. So we are providing 127.0.0.1, which is the local IP address or loopback IP address for this particular machine. Once we click on OK, it takes the IP address configuration. We need to just enable and disable so that the configuration takes place quickly. Once we have done that, we can now proceed to promote this machine as a domain controller. Let me check the name. So if I check the name of the machine is 10 DC05, and now I'm going to promote it to be a domain controller. So in order to promote it to be a domain controller, we need to click on server manager. Once we click on server manager, select the local server, make sure the time zone is reflecting correctly, and also I'm going to disable the IE enhanced configuration. So now I'm going to install the Active Directory domain controller role from the server manager wizard. So we need to select the Active Directory domain services and put a check mark again behind it and click on next. Once we click on next, or we need to do what we need to do, we need to click on continue clicking on next unless it asks for some specific information. So we are ready to reboot once the Active Directory role is installed on this server. Let's wait for it to finish. I'm pausing the video. So as you can see, the Active Directory services role has installed successfully. I'm clicking on close now, and after clicking on close, we have some tasks. We need to click on promote this server to be domain controller. Once we click on that, we need to make sure that we select the option forest in a new domain. So let's select the option and then provide the root domain name. Our domain name is going to be starkindustries.com. Click on next. Because this is the first domain controller, so it has to be a new domain controller in a new forest, a new domain in a new forest. So let's select the domain forest functional label as server Windows Server 2008 R2. We can change it if required later on. So I'm just making sure that we keep both the forest functional label and domain functional label same. And now we need to provide the directory services restore mode password. Click on next and then click on next. So now it's going to go through the installation of the Active Directory Forest and Active Directory domain on this particular domain controller. Click on Next for the NetBIOS name. Click on Next, and you can, if you want, you can review this selection and then click on Next. So it's going to take some time over here. Once it is done installing the Active Directory services, we will resume the video again. So it looks like it is done checking for the prerequisites. Let's click on install and wait for it to finish then. I'm pausing the video for a minute here. So as you can see that the machine has been rebooted after the domain controller role was installed on it, and now we are waiting for it to come up so that we can log on to our newly configured domain controller. Once we log on, I'll show you the Active Directory domain and services, DNS, and other things that where we need to make some configuration changes. So we're now logging to our domain as administrator. Controller. So now we are logged on to the domain with our administrator credentials. So let's check the rules that has got installed. So we can type tsc.msc and see that we have Active Directory domain services users on computer available to create users an account. Let's also check the DNS is working or not. Yeah, so we have DNS server service configured properly, and this server is now providing the DNS and Active Directory domain services. In the next video, we are going to configure the ESXi server settings. We're going to configure the some host names for our ESXi infrastructure. So let's wait for it and let's resume in the next video. Thank you, and if you like my work, please share and subscribe. Thank you.